Remember when you didn't have to take out a loan to buy Pokemon Emerald? Me too. It's almost like you shouldn't have to do that in the first place. It's no secret that Pokemon is more lucrative than ever, and that bleeds into everything. Merchandise, collectibles, and definitely the games. The pandemic truly made a lasting impact on everything, especially retro game collecting. And now Pokemon games are being treated as gold, despite millions of copies floating around. While certain console generations have really spiked in prices, they're never to the degree that Pokemon games have experienced, and I want to investigate why. I've consulted articles on the possible reasons, but all I got were generic answers like supply and demand, nostalgia, but it can't be that simple, right? So let's deep dive into exactly how Pokemon became such an expensive hobby. From the very beginning, Pokemon revolves around the idea of collecting. It's not a coincidence that "Gotta catch 'em all" is the tagline. It's not enough to have only some things. It's an incentive to collect everything, and I mean everything, which requires good ol' money. You want to complete the entire Pokédex? You gotta buy more than one game. You want to get all the sitting cuties? Time for a shopping spree at the Pokemon Center. You want all the rare cards from a set? You better start buying those hefty booster boxes to even stand a chance. Pokemon is one of the biggest media franchises for a reason. They have a system to produce so many products in order to meet the ravenous demand. Certain Pokemon games have skyrocketed in prices since the pandemic, and I'm not talking about those limited editions. I'm talking about standard releases that were readily available in store shelves. According to VG charts, Pokemon Emerald sold more than 7 million units during its release, yet it fetches up to way too many dollars on eBay? Like actual tomfoolery. Game Freak is not well known for actively preserving their games for a new generation, the same way that the Mario or even Zelda franchises have come to expect. Instead, the Pokemon Company likely leverages the lack of preservation as a way to repackage familiar experiences to modern audiences. Notice how they really take their time to remake or re-release games when the demand is most likely at its highest, and you know those limited edition double packs in recent years? That makes it pretty clear that they want players to own multiple Pokemon games. It also doesn't help that Pokemon continues to be a global phenomenon. I personally wasn't around to experience the original Pokemania, but I imagine even a fraction of that is what we're experiencing right now. Not only are longtime fans as engaged as ever, but you got the general public suddenly interested in Pokemon everything. Luckily, I haven't ever experienced ridicule for liking Pokemon, but it's not even taboo anymore to say that you like it. In fact, it may be a statement. Pokemon has always targeted a younger audience, but as the franchise grows, so does the age range of fans. Many longtime players like myself who never grew out of Pokemon pretty much stay collectors for life, but now have disposable income. As frugal as I am, I'm not above having the urge to get Pokemon games that I don't have, just because. And where there is limited supply, the demand only grows stronger. America has had a long history of collectible crazes. Beanie Babies, comic books, coins, it doesn't matter the product. If there is a high enough demand, suddenly everyone will care about it. And it's safe to say that retro games now fit that criteria. An infamous example in recent years, Logan Paul. Just one man created insane demand for Pokemon cards, resulting in jacked up prices and people literally fighting over trading cards. The Mario 64 Wada game scandal, toying with one of the most popular games of all time as an investment? It sounds unreal, but as a result, the entire retro game scene is now riddled with bad actors that see video games as stocks rather than entertainment. If you're still not convinced, check out the prices of games depending on the region. Most times, North American prices tower over Japanese and even PAL prices. Yeah, you can still buy Heart Gold for a reasonable price if you can understand Japanese. Specifically in North America, it's so normalized to have this collector mentality. Buy low, sell high, hang onto it until you make a big profit, literally do anything except treat it as a video game. Not only that, but you're encouraged to brag about it. It may not always be the braggadocious kind, but even just having it in your collection can still be considered a flex. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being proud of the games you own, but the mindset around Pokemon games has really changed, specifically on the YouTube side. I'm sure a lot of us remember a specific era of Pokemon YouTube, full of top 10s, trivia, vanilla Nuzlocks, crusty gameplay footage, game reviews, simpler times. But nowadays, Pokemon content has expanded into something more dedicated, more hardcore, if you will. You got more niche topics gaining traction, basically entire videos highlighting a feature that only certain games have, deep diving into specific mechanics and even modifying them, and of course you got the gauntlet videos that are intentionally difficult to replicate. They feed into this idea that you need to own the games to truly get what they're talking about, but the main culprit has been people bragging about their Pokemon hauls. You know the ones I'm talking about. I found this rare game that sold millions of units, buying every Pokemon game because you poor people can't. Take a look at my vintage Pokemon card collection that you can't afford. It all feels very sensational. Actually, too sensational. Back then, it wasn't all that impressive to own a lot of Pokemon games, or cards, or merchandise. There were exceptions, of course, but most fans were fully capable of going on eBay and buying what they wanted for a reasonable price. But now it's treated as this exclusive club that only the elite and rich can participate in. Why? Because it all leads back to these insanely inflated prices. If Pokemon is in the title, it has to be worth a fortune apparently. A concrete example of this issue is the difference between Pokemon's 20th and 25th anniversary. I was a mere teenager in 2016 when the 20th anniversary rolled around, and I remember that whole year was filled to the brim with fan service. Game Freak revealed Sun and Moon, which promised to shake up the franchise. You got free mythicals throughout the entire year, which were very fun to collect. And how could we forget the explosive success of Pokemon Go? That meant metric tons of nostalgic fans wanting to revisit their childhood games. And when you look at prices on price charting around this time, there's a very clear spike on every classic Pokemon title, but as soon as the hype died, so did the inflated prices. Everything was back to normal for a good few years. It was nice, and that's how it should have been after Pokemon's 25th anniversary, but we know that was not the case at all. In 2021, we were in the thick of a pandemic, and all that free time meant an overwhelming interest in retro games. What's interesting is that at the beginning of COVID, the prices of retro Pokemon games remained reasonable for the majority of 2020, but then coincidentally, when Pokemon celebrated its 25th anniversary, that's when prices skyrocketed. I vividly remember in that exact moment, April 2021, sitting in disbelief that people were not only selling, but buying very common Pokemon games for over $100. It felt like a Pokepocalypse at the time. And here we are, still unable to reasonably buy old Pokemon games. What now? I've done more than enough complaining about these prices, and last time I checked, I cannot control the market, and neither can you. So there's no point in spending this much energy wallowing in despair. What can we do about this? Well, believe it or not, there are many other things you can do to satiate that desire without feeding into the problem. I'm gonna focus on the games because I'm not too familiar with the cards or merchandise. It may not feel like it, but older games are more accessible than you think. If there is a recent remake or port that's suitable, I promise you it will feel just as good as the original release. You do not need to own the original cartridge or disc to fully experience the game, and if nothing of the sort exists, well, emulation, flashcards, and homebrew are there for a reason. They may not be the official ways, but if the alternative is to literally spend insane amounts of money that the original developers will never benefit from, you should not feel ashamed of resorting to these methods. As long as you do the research and know where to look, you can enjoy yourself without murdering your bank account. Another great option to fill that void is to replay the Pokemon games you do own. Chances are there's at at least one game that you haven't touched in a while holding an ancient save file. And if you're anything like me, you refuse to override your original save file because you'd hate to get rid of all those memories. And it doesn't help that Pokemon games always have one save file each, and you'd have to go out of your way to create a new one. It almost feels illegal to do it. But I guarantee that starting a new adventure is always more fulfilling than impulsively buying that copy of Leaf Green. And if you really want to preserve your original adventure, we have the technology to back up our saves. Either through cart dumpers or homebrew, your games don't have to be shackled to your first playthrough. I'm saying this to myself as well. Finally, if you must spend money, spend it on something you truly want. A game that you know you will cherish. Not because it's valuable, not because people are telling you that you need it, but because it gives you joy and desire to play it. If you're looking for the quote-unquote authentic experience, you gotta ask yourself if it's worth paying a premium for something that's probably accessible in much cheaper ways. Will you actually play it to justify the value, or is it just something you want to brag about owning? I know I may be coming off a little harsh, but frankly I'm tired of video games being treated as stocks when this hobby started out as a genuine passion for the games we love to play and want to try out, and now a lot of us feel shut out from that chance. If you still want to buy older Pokemon games at a decent price, start with the previous generation because it's likely gonna be the cheapest before becoming crazy expensive. Some recent releases may have flown under the radar by fans or even yourself, and you'll never know what becomes coveted in the future until it's already too late. Think of it as future FOMO. Ultimately, it's your money to spend. If you just need to get the games you want because you're sick of waiting, don't let me stop you. But I just hope down the line that you won't be regretting your purchase. We're all just trying to enjoy some Pokemon, but it doesn't mean it has to be this bloodbath of capitalism and elitism. I'm sure everyone on the planet desperately wishes they can enjoy Pokemon without having to do the mental gymnastics about the true value of these games. In the words of Harry Styles, you know it's not the same as it was. Back then, we would have never predicted these prices, but this is the new reality. We have no control over the value of these products, and we never will. No one likes to feel like their favorite hobby is being exploited and wrung dry. It's exhausting, and you can't help but wonder if this is even fun anymore. I sincerely hope that all this despair ages poorly in the future, but until then, the only thing you can control is how you adapt and accept the current climate. You do not have to subscribe to what everyone else is buying or what's trending. The popularity of Pokemon has fluctuated over the years, so it's unrealistic to expect things to remain the same forever. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to enjoy a franchise that has gained many new fans recently. If there's anything to take away from the insane demand, it may be an exhausting time to be a Pokemon fan, but it's also one of the best times to be a Pokemon fan. You can share your love of the series with so many more people now, and I believe that's something to be grateful for.